And that's the Pittsburgh Penguins as trade deadline losers. Why? Because they didn't bring anyone in of significance to add to this aging core, which A, might not make the playoffs, B, if they do make the playoffs, are probably going to get steamrolled by Boston.
You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah! Good evening and welcome to episode 162 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Harper, Casey, and Chad all together for this one. Guys, the NHL trade deadline, or shall we say trade deadline week, is now in the rearview mirror. Final stretch of the season before the playoffs already. Into March now. How we doing?
Doing good, doing good. The trade deadline, not so fun, but everything beforehand was great. So that kept the week exciting, and then the weekend was pretty fun with Rebecca's birthday, and it seems like everyone else I know had a birthday in the first week of March, including Paige. So Chad had a party the same night we did, kind of stole each other's thunder, but yeah, it's a great weekend.
Yeah, had a party the same night for Paige that you did for Rebecca. And also Adam had a party on the weekend, too. It was his birthday. So just all the birthdays in one weekend. And it was a shame that we couldn't all get together. But obviously, you know, we had some different priorities and stuff. I'm sure we all had a good time. I know I did, that's for sure. But I'm doing well, boys. I'm just like, we mentioned fantasy before we started recording, and I can't believe we're almost in the playoffs now. Like, it seems like, you know, now that we've started the playoffs, or next week when we start the playoffs, we're getting towards the end of the actual NHL regular season. So it just feels crazy kind of to think about where we are. You know, the deadline is passed and fantasy playoffs are coming up, and sooner or later the NHL playoffs are going to be here, and that is the best time of the year. Other than that, also wanted to mention too that I officially am a standing desk king now in the group with Casey. I have my electric standing desk that I got today, actually. So I basically dropped everything, built the desk, did my cable management and everything. And I don't know why, like, I'm like a kid in a candy store, or a kid that just got a new toy and had to assemble it and everything. I just had so much fun today doing that and putting off work. Maybe that's why I had so much fun. But yeah, doing well, all things considered. How about you, Harp? What's up?
I'm good, man. Can't complain. Another good weekend. We had Dancing Stars of Leeds Grenville at TIS on Saturday night. It was the final one, so that was really good. And looking forward to getting to do some Brockville Braves playoff games here coming up, because their regular season is almost over, and they're looking pretty good right now. So yeah, all is good. And the whole standing desk thing, did you guys get that from Dwight Schrute from The Office, or how did you both get on the standing desks?
I'm not gonna lie, I got absolutely got by Instagram like ad targeting, and I always knew I wanted a stand-up desk, but it didn't really happen until I saw a bunch of ads targeting me about electric desks, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And it's been great. I don't have it set up right now because I'm currently moving, but yeah.
Yeah, and for me, Harp, it's just like, I'm an athlete, so that's what it's all about. Just keeping the legs fresh, just in case.
Just like, I gotta calf raises all day.
In case I got to go dunk on someone or something, you know, like, you never know. So just being an athlete, that's why you need a standing desk.
Oh, of course. All right, boys, let's get into this episode. We're going to do Fantasy Corner later on. Chad, as you mentioned, this is the final week in the regular season for our Boys in the Booth Fantasy Hockey League, so that's coming up later. But we're going to talk about winners and losers from the NHL trade deadline. Kind of low-hanging fruit when it comes to a topic, but you know, a pretty popular one right now, given all the moves and everything that happened leading up to the trade deadline. So we're each going to pick a winner first and then a loser. So what do you guys want to start with, winners or losers?
Let's start positively.
Yeah.
Positive? Okay. All right. I like it. Let's start with our winners. Case, let's go to you first, man.
Oddly enough, Harper is wearing the hat currently of the team that I think is one of the winners, but my winner of the trade deadline, and that's the Ottawa Senators. They made a couple moves, two of them not as nearly as important as one, but that Jakob Chychrun move was fantastic. I have been under contract that I'm not allowed to talk about Chychrun and trade rumors, but the contract is now broken because he's been traded. It's done. It means I can talk about it. I can celebrate it because, boy, did they ever get him for a lot less than what we thought it was going to be. Like, it was always mentioned that it's going to be either multiple firsts and a blue chip prospect, or a good ready now player, a blue chip prospect and a first. Like, we heard so much, and Arizona's been turning down these guys and turning down these guys because they're not getting enough. And then it comes down to the wire and they trade them for, I think, pennies on the dollar, if you ask me. This is great. And this, we've talked about in the past, is exactly what Ottawa needed. They needed a defenseman, and they needed a top pairing defenseman. They got that in Jakob Chychrun, and it's going to look good having him and Chabot on this team. They've got depth on defense now in the pipeline. They've got Sanderson, Zub playing now, Bernard Docker, Lassie Thompson, the list goes on. This team is stacked on the back end for years to come. And the other thing I really loved about this trade is it showed the direction. They played their cards. They said, this is what we're doing with this team now. We're going to be good now. We're done with the rebuild. We've got lots of youth on the team, good youth on the team. We've brought in Giroux to be this leader who is playing unbelievable for them. Just it really shows the direction of this team, and they got a really good player in Chychrun. A couple stats for Chychrun, just quickly. Since he entered the league in 2016-2017, he's 13th for D-men in goals per game. Somehow he's only a minus 36 in 376 games for the Arizona Coyotes, playing 21, 22, 23 minutes a night. So that's pretty special in its own right. And then some of the stats they're showing on TSN about him, his 5v5 zone exit carries, he's 4th in the league. Zone entry carries, he's 3rd in the league. Zone possession time, he's 11th. Expected goals off the cycle, he's 3rd. Scoring chances, he's 9th. Shots from the slot, he's 2nd. He is so good at moving the puck, skating with the puck, being that first pass. So this is great for the Senators, and I'm over the moon for that team because I think the fans are ready to see them be good again. By the way, the trade was for a 2023 first, 2024 second, and a 2026 second with conditions on the first 2 picks there.
Pennies on the dollar is right, Case. Like, we thought Jakob Chychrun was going to go for a king's ransom because he was in rumors for a year and a half. They held on to him, and finally, I don't know if it was the player being upset or Arizona just feeling like this has dragged on too long, we have to do something, and decided to take that lesser return. Or maybe they just didn't have that kind of return out there for the player. I don't know exactly what it was, but they got the deal done finally, and Jakob Chychrun completely overhauls that blue line in Ottawa. So you say they're the winners of the trade deadline. I say they're definitely up there. Like, it's a different looking team with Jakob Chychrun. We've seen that in the few games that he's already played for them. And now all of a sudden, you know, Pierre Dorion made the promise to Claude Giroux that he was going to compete and get some extra pieces so that they can be a good team going forward. And now all of a sudden, they're looking like it. They're right back in the playoff race. And I think in their last 10 games, they're one of the hottest teams in the league. I think the Bruins might be the only hotter team right now.
Exactly tied with the Bruins. And so, like, all the stats, I saw a snapshot of it, or a shot of it yesterday, I think, and they're the exact same. And it was like, here's a list of stats, here's a list of stats. They're the exact same. One's Boston, one's Ottawa. It's crazy.
Yeah, so there you go. They're playing at such a clip right now where, you know, they're trying to squeeze into that final playoff spot. And like we talked about before we started recording today, the East is completely wide open for those last 2 spots. There's about 6 or 7 teams competing right now for those 2 spots. So, Case, I agree with you. Loved that move in particular for the Sens. And I think they're definitely one of the winners of the deadline. What do you think, Art?
Well, obviously, I agree. I love this pick, and while I don't think it's as bad of a return for Arizona, or could be as bad of a return as a lot of people out there think. I think it all kind of depends where that first round pick lands in the draft this year for the Ottawa Senators and for the Coyotes. The Phoenix or Arizona could end up getting a really high end player with that pick, and it could end up being a little bit better. But obviously we're not talking about the Coyotes, we're talking about the Senators who made this deal. Pierre Dorion was actually at the Brockville Memorial Center on Friday night watching his son Antoine play for the Hawkesbury Hawks. So, you know, I'm doing play-by-play, and I look to my right, and right down at the other end of the rink is Pierre Dorion right there, just a few days after making this deal. So really exciting for the Ottawa Senators. What a shot in the arm at a perfect time. The team has won 5 of their last 6. The streak obviously ended last night with kind of a stinker against the Chicago Blackhawks, but up to that point they've been red hot. You can tell that this means the world to Jakob Chychrun. He's got local connections, obviously, his grandfather and his sister being in Ottawa. He's so happy to be there. He looks great. He's in such great shape. He plays that heavy game. He's got a bomb of a shot. He scored a great goal for his first as a Senator on Saturday night in the win over the Blue Jackets. Before that, played a great road game in a big win for them over the New York Rangers. And got to give a lot of credit to Pierre Dorion for pulling off this move. Not only by getting the player and pulling it off, but a good general manager, I think, listens to his players, and he obviously listened to guys like Derek Brassard and Claude Giroux, who went to him and were like, we would like some help. We're in a good spot here. We're back in the race. Let's get a guy who can really change the mix here, and no better guy to do that than Jakob Chychrun, and really serve a huge need for them, which is a top 4 defenseman. So I love it all the way through for the Ottawa Senators and for Jakob Chychrun. Really happy for him, especially that this saga is now all over.
Yeah, and I expect this to be such a weight off his mind that he's only going to get better in the next coming months. So I'm really hopeful that they can make a push and be a playoff team, one of those wild card spots, preferably over the New York Islanders. It would be great to see Ottawa in there again, and he's the guy to help them do it. Like I said, they needed a top pairing defenseman bad, and now they have it. And between him and Shabbat, that's so many minutes. Like, what is that, 48 minutes a night from those two guys?
Yeah, exactly. And it takes some of the load off of Shabbat, which is really needed, because we know how much he's been asked to do there over the last several years. And you've got Zub, and Jake Sanderson is going to be a star for them back there as well. So I just love it. And also a really great part of this, 2 more years at $4.6 million for Jakob Chychrun. That is huge for the kind of player that he is.
Think about dumping Zaitsev, his cap, and then bringing back Chychrun for like the same amount. It's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it sure is. All right, off the Senators page again. Case, a great pick for one of the winners at the deadline. Chad, let's get your winner.
Yeah, so Harp, you said off the top that, or maybe before we started recording, that you think you might know who I'm talking about. But I can guarantee you don't, because I'm picking the New York Rangers as the winners of the deadline. I called them frauds about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago now. I said in a hot take episode that they might miss the playoffs this year, and I mean, listen, that's not going to happen. They're firmly in. They were a pretty good team before the deadline. Now, I think they are a great team, and a team that is, one of the top teams in the East, in my opinion. And I guess we'll see how it works out in the playoffs. But I think the Rangers are the winners of the deadline because they got 2 of the best available players on the market. You can argue that Timo Meier was the best player on the market, and I think that's a pretty fair argument to make. But after him, when you look down the list, Tarasenko and Patrick Kane are two of the other best players that were available, and they got them both, and they didn't have to give up very much. So Kane, Tarasenko, also Nico Mikkola to add depth on the blue line, and Tyler Mott to add depth up front. 4 players coming in, all impact players in my opinion, and going out, you've got Kravtsov, who you needed to move because the player was a bit disgruntled. You've got Sammy Blais going out the door. That's fine. He's replaced by Mott, Hunter Skinner, and some picks. Those pieces going out compared to those pieces coming in, I think they win 100%, 10 times out of 10. They got very much a better team from this deadline. And now, you look at their lines top to bottom, they are so deep, and every line can score. Now you've got the kid line of Kakko, Hedl, and Lafreniere playing on the third line instead of the second, or breaking them up and playing them all in the top 6, or Hedl as a 3C or whatever. But now they're all on the third line playing together and getting even easier matchups. And I know I've said in the past I want those 3 players to play more, but now you're justified in pushing them down the lineup because their top 6 is absolutely loaded. So I think the Rangers are going to be scary in the playoffs, and it's all because of a wonderful trade deadline. So they're the winners in my books.
Yeah, that's exactly why the Devils need to pass Carolina here, because they're going to have to play the Rangers if not, and that's just going to put me through all sorts of stress because I hate their guts, and they're going to be a good team, especially in the playoffs. They had a deep run last year.
Yep, last year.
Yeah, Stanley Cup or Eastern Conference Final, right?
Yeah, lost to Tampa. Yep.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
Anyways, talk about dollars. Or pennies on the dollar for Patrick Kane. I don't think anyone was expecting such a small return for him, but just saying, no points and a -4 in his first 2 games for the Rangers. So I think everyone else who's been traded has at least scored a goal or an assist. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I can't deny there's been a great trade deadline for the Rangers. They did it last year. They picked up a ton of guys going in. I think Andrew Copp is the one that really shined for them last year. And so far it's been Tarasenko, but expect Patrick Kane to be absolutely money in the playoffs. So that's a lot of experience you just picked up for this playoff push, and it's going to be scary, but hopefully they're going to be a first-round exit.
Yeah, could very well be a first-round exit depending on who they play. But also, I wanted to mention, didn't they also get Tyler Mott last year at the deadline?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. So that's 2 years in a row now that they've traded for Tyler Mott, which is kind of funny. And then he went and signed in Ottawa in the offseason, and now he's back in New York. I think it's pretty cool. And sneaky good player too for your bottom 6 to provide some energy. He's obviously bounced around a ton, kind of found himself in Vancouver and has bounced around since. But I mean, they know him, they seem to like him, and he's an energy player. So
yeah, they didn't really give up much for him. So there's Julian Gauthier in a 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently they tried to re-sign Tyler Mott in the summer, but they just didn't have enough room to be able to fit him in. And so I'm not surprised that he goes back to the Rangers at all. He's a good player.
That's why the NHL should just have loans. Loan that player to Ottawa.
That'd be cool. And then what? You get him back at the end of the year? At the end of the season?
You can recall him whenever, but you have to pay a fee.
Oh, I wonder if... I mean, I know you can loan in the American League. I wonder if it's the same kind of structure as that. I don't know. That'd be cool, though. I could see that.
That would be cool, for sure. That's a good idea, Case. With the Rangers, I mean, on paper, everything looks great. Final Four appearance last year. They could win the Stanley Cup this year. Shesterkin has his game back, and they've got all the right elements. The only thing I kind of wonder about is with adding Tarasenko and Patrick Kane, you've already got Panarin there, Zibanejad, a lot of guys that want the puck on their stick. And I wonder about that if they kind of have too much of the same in the top 6. But again, they're a great team. I could see them going on a deep playoff run. That's the only thing I wonder about, though. A lot of guys there that are stars and want the puck on their stick when it matters the most.
I'm going to agree and disagree with you at the exact same time here, because I agree that they have players playing together that are the same, but I think that they've got a good mix going on. But sorry, I'm explaining that all wrong. What I'm saying is the first line currently has 3 goal scorers who want to get past 2, and then the second line has 3 guys who want to pass. So they've got to do something about jumbling that up, in my mind.
Right.
When you talk about Panarin, that guy is a playmaker. He passes the puck. Kane can be both, but I see him more of a playmaker nowadays. Mm-hmm. And then Zibanejad is he's been on a 60-goal pace before. Tarasenko's supposed to be a sniper. Kreider scored a boatload of goals last year. So I think they've got 3 guys who are goal scorers and 3 guys who are passers, and if they can find that formula properly, they'll be all right. But I see where you're coming from.
What worries me more about their top 6 is not that they have a lot of guys who want the puck at the same time, or that they have a lot of the same thing. Even though I do really like the top 6, I see a lot of guys who can't play defense. They don't have many two-way players. So that is one concern for the team. I mean, you've got Shesterkin and a pretty good back end as well. So in the playoffs, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they do what Edmonton did last year and just kind of outscore their problems. Like Connor and Leon both had 2 points per game last year. Not saying anyone on the Rangers is the same as those two, but they've got a lot of weapons, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see how far the Rangers go this year. All right, my winner of the deadline, I think one of the winners for sure, and it's kind of funny, we've all gone in a bit of a different direction for our winners. Case, you went with a team that's very much in the race, in the thick of it, could make it into the playoffs in a wild card spot in the Ottawa Senators. Chad, you went with a potential Stanley Cup contender in the New York Rangers. I'm going to go with a team that kind of punted on the rest of the season, and I think was very smart about how to handle all of this, given how the season has gone for them and where they're kind of at as a franchise after winning in 2018. Of course, I'm talking about the Washington Capitals. I think they did really well in the moves that they made. I think they got great value in return in the Orlov Hathaway deal with the Boston Bruins. I think they got great return for Lars Eller from the Colorado Avalanche. They get a second-round pick there in I believe 2025, and then that trade with the Maple Leafs. Chad, I'm sorry to say, but a young, talented defenseman in Rasmus Sandin. We were talking about this off air, but he's a young guy who just kind of got caught up in a numbers game on that Toronto blue line that is now just so overcrowded with defensemen. He ends up going somewhere where they are looking towards next year, and they're like, geez, we have next to no blue liners other than John Carlson. So he gets a great opportunity there. Sandin has got 5 points in 2 games, and Washington gave up a late first-round pick and Eric Gustafson, who probably won't get re-signed by Toronto in the summer, for a really good young player who just needed an opportunity. So I think when you add up all 3 of those points that I just brought up, I think it was a very good deadline for the Capitals. I think it was very smart. Brian McClellan realizing that this is not our year, and I think that they're going to kind of reset things this summer here and change up the roster a little bit, hopefully get healthy and be right back in the mix next season. I really like what the Capitals were able to do.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked when I first saw the Orlov deal. You kind of think that Washington's in the same boat as Pittsburgh, where they've got the aging core and they'd want to make one more push, but they are outside of the playoff picture, which is a tight run in the East. So I think it makes a lot of sense to make this kind of quick decision to sell and boy, did that Orlov deal, that must have put up the big billboard or something, because there's quite a few trades came in after that. I think they've got good value in all of their trades, so I can see why you picked them as the winners. It's definitely a different direction than what Chad and I took, because we took playoff teams, but you were going for the team that sold smart, and that topic's probably going to come up later when we talk about who we think lost. But yeah, that's a good haul for Orlov and Hathaway. You're kind of replacing Orlov with Sandin down the road. I think that's going to be such a great trade, because Sandin's going to get a chance in Washington. He's going to be their number one guy for a bit now, because Orlov's out in the trade and Carlson is injured. So Sandin's the guy. It's been great for my fantasy team so far. And then selling off on Eller, who's had a tough season, for a second round pick is great. Marcus Johansson going for his average rate of a third round pick at the trade deadline is another solid trade. So yeah, Washington, some good moves.
You know, you've been traded too much at the deadline if you have an average rate. It's like, what's the going rate for Marcus Johansson? Here it is.
It's a third in 2 years, sir.
It's like Tyler Mott. I'm interested to see what they paid last year versus this year. If I should pull that up, see if it's the average rate or if it changed. But no, Harp, I totally agree with you, man. I think Washington are one of the winners of the deadline, because like so many teams try to hold on for too long. And I'm not saying that this is Washington making the decision that they are totally going to tear it down and rebuild. I think they just realized that, look, they couldn't get deals done with a guy like Orlov, or, you know, maybe a guy like Eller doesn't fit into their team next year. So they just kind of managed their assets in the best way possible, in my opinion. So I think that's great that they did that. Like I said, there are some teams who just hang on too long. The term own rental, I don't know who coined that. It might have been Kyle Dubas, honestly, a couple of years ago. But own rental is a thing where you keep your own player and then make the push for the playoffs, or keep him for the playoffs. And like, if you're Washington, you're probably not going to make it, even if you keep all those guys. So an own rental wouldn't make any sense. I think they managed their assets perfectly here. I do think they overpaid a little bit for Rasmus Sandin. I don't know if he's worth quite a first-round pick. That's why I was kind of happy with the value coming back from Toronto's perspective, because you upgrade on the player right now in Gustafsson and you get a first-round pick. But you guys are going to make me cry talking about Rasmus Sandin, man. Like, I'm going to miss that guy so much. And yes, he's going to get a fantastic opportunity in Washington. Like you said, 5 points in 2 games. It's great to see for the player, and I think Washington handled the deadline masterfully based on where they are in the standings and, you know, with that aging core and everything.
By the way, Tyler Mott's average trade rate is all out of whack now. He went for a 4th-round pick last year, so...
Yeah. Okay. So we're between a 4th and what, a 7th and a prospect. So, okay. It's about, average would be like a 5 or a 6 then, right?
Yeah.
5th? Yeah.
There we go. All right, on to our losers now from the trade deadline and leading up to it. Case, let's get your loser.
And now, a word from our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Liquid IV. Whether you're staying active or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. Just 1 stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. It contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients, it's non-GMO, and it's free from gluten, dairy, and soy. There are plenty of awesome flavors, but my personal favorite right now is lemon lime. So, get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth at checkout. That's 20% off anything in the store when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today with Liquid IV. This podcast is also sponsored by the best ticket app out there, SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. So click the link in the description down below to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek.
My loser, and we've been talking about them in several loser episodes, I think, is the Philadelphia Flyers. For the exact opposite reason of Harp's Washington Capitals winner, because they didn't do anything. This is a team that we are pretty certain on the direction of this team. Basically, everyone is, except for perhaps the GM and coach of this team. They didn't sell off on any of their big pieces, JVR being the glaringly obvious one. His contract's done. There's a good chance that he's just going to walk in free agency this year, so not getting anything for him is tough. And I think they could have got a good little price tag on him, but the only trades they made this year were they brought in Isaac Ratcliffe for this future considerations kid, and then they traded Zach McEwen for discount Zach McEwen in Brendan Lemieux and a 2024 fifth-round pick, and then Patrick Brown, a 30-year-old kind of depth center to Ottawa for, I think it was a sixth-round pick. Not enough for a team that's ready for the rebuild. I think that they should have been sellers, and they just didn't do anything. Whereas there's teams out there like Washington, who is, we don't really know if they're a seller yet or a rebuilding team yet. They made all sorts of great deals. The Nashville Predators, who we thought were going to be in the playoff race this year, they sold off and brought in an absolute boatload of picks. It's like, I just think that everyone else was doing it, including Chicago and Arizona, and the Flyers didn't. They got left out of the party, and for me, they're losers off the trade deadline for that reason.
Yeah, I agree with you, Case. I mean, I've been calling for Chuck Fletcher's head for the last, however many seasons, because I think he's the worst general manager in the league. And again, it's no disrespect to him as a person. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but some of the moves and non-moves, for that matter, have just been complete head scratchers. Like the JVR one, he did talk to the media about that and said that he tried and there were no takers for JVR. But at a certain point, you've got to get something back. You have to force a deal through. You have to show your fans that even if we're not good now, we will be in the future with the picks we get for our players. So by not doing anything, I think that's a big fuck you to all Philly fans, and just saying, like, either I can't do my job or I didn't know how or something like that.
And that is exactly one of the reasons why I've picked them as a loser, is because I have since seen so many comments of Flyers fans being pissed off that nothing was done at this trade deadline, whether that be making trades to try to be better next year, or making trades to tank and get draft picks and maybe Connor Bedard. They did neither of those, and I even saw some guy saying, I don't know, what do you say, I'm going to switch to the Wild for a couple of years until the Philadelphia Flyers get Chuck Fletcher out of here. And I was like, hate that comment, but okay, sure.
Man, I'm just happy the Flyers aren't playing in Toronto right now. But, now that we're talking about trashing the Flyers and everything on a Tuesday night, like, I would have my doors locked because Tony DeAngelo would be busting in to tear me apart, because he's been going after everybody online for talking shit about the Flyers. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, there's been some tweets criticizing Chuck Fletcher, and Tony DeAngelo, of all people, very active on Twitter and everywhere else, and has some very he has opinions on a lot of things, we'll say. He came busting in and just started ripping these random people, saying, like, oh, this isn't NHL 23, be a GM mode. Like, he can't just make deals. Were you in the trade calls? Do you know what was offered? And so, maybe I should go lock my door anyways in case Tony is, he can hear this. But
well, I'm going to jump on that lock my door parade right now because he by far got the least amount of points on my fantasy team this past week. So,
oof.
What's he doing about it?
Oof. Yeah, I just thought that was funny though. He's been going after some fans online about this very thing, about fans saying, we're pissed that Chuck didn't make any moves, and Tony came to Chuck's defense basically, and so did Torts, by the way. Tortorella with the media came out and said listen, he tried. So.
Well, I mean, we're kind of beating a dead horse here. I think everybody is ripping on the Philadelphia Flyers. They have been all season and, of course, after the deadline. But, I mean, I agree. And, the Flyers are in a really tough spot because, I think Van Riemsdyk was one of their only pieces that they were able to have out there to get rid of to get a potential return. You're not trading Konechny and guys like Farabee and Provorov.
Why though?
Who have just had.
Why not Konechny? I guess he's hurt now.
I don't know. I see that guy as part of the solution there. Personally.
But the solution's so far down the road. I think they would have got a king's ransom for Konechny this year with how good he's been. So,
no, that's fair.
I get. He is the poster boy when it comes to Philadelphia in my mind. He's just like that Philadelphia mentality and plays a great game there. So I can understand why they wouldn't want to trade him. But man, oh man, they would have got so much for him.
He's had a great season. No, that's a good point for sure. And then the other thing that I was trying to say there, guys like Joel Farabee and Ivan Provorov, who are still young, they've shown flashes of being really good players in this league, but they've just had terrible seasons. And if Philadelphia were to trade them right now, or if they did trade guys like that at the deadline, I mean, it would have been pennies on the dollar. Not a good return at all, and especially for Farabee. He's been healthy scratched. He's been on the fourth line and all of it. He's just had an awful season.
But what about playing the Arizona Coyotes role, or for some reason the Minnesota Wild role this year of eating up dead cap for teams? They didn't decide to do that either. They actually have $3.2 million of just wide open cap that nothing is being used there. So I don't know. It's just strange.
No, that's a good point as well, Case. And the last thing I'll say about the Flyers, if you're a Flyers fan, you have to be hoping that you have a good draft. That this is this potentially could be a franchise-changing draft. I think it needs to be. They have to have a good draft because you look at this team, they're not very good. It looked like a month and a half ago they were kind of back in the race a little bit in the Metro, and then they just they fell back down, and just here we are and everything. And they've got guys that should be in the lineup there, like Couturier, that aren't. But, I mean, you have to deal with that, and you have to try and get some value in and stock up picks and all of that. They haven't done that, but there is some opportunity, I think, at the draft for Chuck Fletcher to make some bigger moves and some smart ones. I'm not talking about the Ristolainen trade, for God's sakes, but to actually do some good work and to move this thing in the right direction, because right now I just have no idea where this franchise is going to be down the road and who's going to be coming in to be the saviors.
Yeah, I truly think that they think if they're healthy next season, everybody's healthy, that they're a playoff team. And they're just so far from that, and everyone can see it except for their management group. And I just don't know where to go from here if you're the Flyers, because if Chuck Fletcher is at the helm, They're going to continue to push. And like, there's the argument that some cities don't have the appetite for a rebuild. But I think if you do it properly and send a message out to your season ticket holders and say, okay, it's going to be tough for a couple years, but we're going to be really, really good after that. I think if you give a timeline and if you're specific and if you're creative about it, because I think that's one thing that they've lacked is creativity in this whole, these last couple years. So if they're able to do something like that, it could work. And I think Philadelphia would be open to a rebuild, but I just don't see it happening with this management group.
I don't think that they could have emotionally taken it after the Super Bowl, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's the case.
Fair enough. At least they've got the Phillies and the Eagles, and the other sports teams in Philly are doing well. But at the end of the day, I think Flyers fans and sports fans in general, they want to have a sense of direction. What direction are we going in? They want to know that. And believe me, guys, with my Sabres for years, it was just spinning wheels, no direction at all, it seemed. And now, I'm as happy as can be because I see where we're going, and it's moving along a lot quicker than I thought. But those poor Flyers fans, they certainly deserve better, and I don't know what we're going to get down the road here. It's going to be interesting. All right, let's move on from the Philadelphia Flyers as one of the losers. And Chad, let's get your loser.
I'm picking another team in the Metro that I actually like quite a bit more than the Philadelphia Flyers, and that's the Pittsburgh Penguins as trade deadline losers. Why? Because they didn't bring anyone in of significance to add to this aging core, which A, might not make the playoffs, B, if they do make the playoffs, are probably going to get steamrolled by Boston. So if you're Pittsburgh, you need to follow the Boston model. Bring in everyone you can and mortgage your future to a certain extent to add to your core and give them one last push or a couple more pushes. And Pittsburgh just didn't do that. They added Mikael Granlund for a second-round pick. That's fine. He's playing at 3C. He has 36 points in 58 games this year in Nashville, none in his first two in Pittsburgh. But he's never scored 30 goals. He's never had 70 points. So essentially, he's a middle six player who can get you some depth scoring, but he's really is a player like that going to move the needle if you don't add anything else? They added Kulikov as well, which again, that's fine, and they added Bonino as a fourth line center who they know and like. And then going out, you've got Brock McGinn, Kasperi Kapanen. Kapanen was a waiver casualty, and some picks, but I just don't think the Pittsburgh Penguins did nearly enough at this deadline to give their core another shot at it. And not only another shot in the playoffs, but another shot in the arm, another injection to just give them some energy to be able to get to the playoffs, because they've had some decent goaltending this year, which is, the first time in a while. I guess Jari was good last year until the playoffs, but you need to take advantage of it if you're Pittsburgh, and I feel like they very much didn't at the deadline.
Yeah, I think that everyone's a little disappointed in Pittsburgh at this trade deadline, and I think there's an expectation of more coming, but I don't know if I can go as far as you are, because I think they did bring in some good pieces at some good value. I think Kulikov for a third and a player that wasn't really playing for them, and Brock McGinn, or playing well for them, is good value. Nick Bonino for a seventh and a fifth is great value in my mind for a depth guy with a ton of experience who could be playing better on the Pittsburgh Penguins compared to San Jose. Granlund is having a phenomenal year for him. I get that he's not quite the piece most people wanted for Pittsburgh, but I think he's having a great season, and a second is a good price for him. And Teddy Bluger as well. I think that they've brought in good pieces, but I think they brought in the pieces of a team that are second or third in the conference. like teams to push your already phenomenal team over the edge, whereas they're a team that still needs to make the playoffs. So that, in my mind, could make them a loser.
I agree with that case, and I don't have, I'll just be clear, I don't have a problem with the value they gave up at all. I think for the most part they win all of the deals that they made.
Makes sense.
It's just, if you're Pittsburgh, I think you have to follow the Boston approach and just truly give your guys the best chance to win. Add an Orlov if that's what you need. Different situation, but why not be in on Timo Meier? Make the money work. It's just, I feel like they needed that one big piece, and they just weren't able to get it. So for me, that's a loss at the trade deadline in my books.
Yeah, I don't have really much more to add on the Pens, but we've heard this time and again, when you have guys like Crosby, Malkin, and Letang, you're going for it every single year. And I was surprised that, again, going back to Washington and kind of the direction that they decided to go in, I was surprised a little bit, just the fact that Ovechkin is there and wants to win another cup after winning in 2018. But, I look at Pittsburgh and I just thought that, they're in such a similar spot, like the Capitals, and just figured that the smart thing to do would be for them to do the same thing as Washington. Just did not seem to be on the table there. Mike Sullivan and Ron Hextall, I think that there was some sort of disagreement there. We heard that Sullivan really wanted them to bring in a player like Jacob Chychrun, and Hextall just felt that they didn't have the assets to do it. But Case, I'm with you. They did add 3 pretty good players who I think can help them. How much, we're not sure. And I do like that point that, it's sort of like the moves that the Colorado Avalanche made last year to put them over the top with guys like Arturi Lehkonen and so on and so forth. So don't expect the Pens to necessarily get in and go on a big run, but you never know with this group. And, as long as you have Crosby and company, they're going to be in it. So
think about it this way, though. Essentially, Pittsburgh traded Brock McGinn and John Marino for Kulikov and Ty Smith. So I don't. When you put it that way, the value starts going out the window, because you replaced the worst player in Kulikov for John Marino, and then brought in Ty Smith, who has upside, but he's an AHL player.
The thing with McGinn, I don't have a problem with him going out, because you bring in Bonino, and I think they're pretty similar players. I think Bonino, obviously, because he's a centerman, just fits the bottom 6 better for this team. They needed a guy to take important draws, and Bonino does that.
He's been there before.
And he won 2 cups with them, so that's something too. But man, I just looked at the moves and thought, no problem with the value. Just thought they should have added bigger and more impactful pieces. And that's why they're my losers.
And before the comment warriors come out about my John Marino comments, I get that there's cap implications and they got to move the cap. I just thought it was fun to look at it that way.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. All right, my loser, and Case, I know that you want to talk about these guys, but they're the Calgary Flames for me. It's been a tough year in Calgary, boys. I mean, there's no other way around it. We looked at this team on paper after after being forced to pivot after losing your 2 superstars in Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk, and we all thought, geez, they get Huberdeau and Weegar, and they've done a really great job pivoting from a really tough situation, and they're a good team, and they'll be right back in the playoffs and maybe could win the Pacific Division. No, nothing's worked. They had a lot of guys who had career years last season, including the guys that they brought in that Florida trade. Huberdeau there this year has been an absolute disaster. He just doesn't have it. The goaltending, I think Daryl Sutter has been extremely hard on these guys when it's been so tough there, and they need a guy behind the bench who can get off them a little bit, just pull back a little bit, it's been really tough. And so, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs at this point. They have to go on a huge run at this point late in the season to make it in. They haven't won 4 games in a row all season. So to now try and string a bunch of wins together this late and try and squeak in, it's just not possible, I don't think, for this team. So they're in a really tough spot, but I really thought that Brad Treliving, with the way he is, he's an aggressive general manager. Obviously, we know that. He likes to be in on everything, that he would really, really do his best. And you know what? He probably tried, but I really thought he'd be able to get something done to give this team a shot in the arm, and he failed to do that. He made 2 minor trades, redeemed Zahorna to Toronto for Dryden Hunt, just a minor league deal at best, and then swapped out a couple of players in Connor Mackey and Brett Ritchie for, of course, Brett's brother, Nick Thick Ritchie, and Troy Stecher, which is a move that really won't do much for your club. I think that Ritchie is a Calgary Daryl Sutter kind of player, but at this point, that's not something that's going to do a lot for you. I think that Treliving was maybe better off to give his team a shot in the arm with someone of significance, or accumulate some picks and some prospects and kind of do what Washington, Nashville, St. Louis did leading up to the deadline. Maybe by next year's deadline, this team will be in that spot where they will have some big pieces to sell off, and they can bring in a ton of assets and focus on their young players, because I think they've got lots of good ones. But man, we did not expect Calgary to be in this spot, and I just think they could have added something, or just made some good moves at the deadline. They just kind of stood pat, and they're not any better, and probably not going to make the playoffs. So thoughts on the Flames as losers?
I think everyone is disappointed in this team for not making a move to try to make the push. But if you take a step back and think about this team, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's going to be hard to catch Colorado and Edmonton as the wild card spots. Think about those 2 teams being the wild card spots at the moment. It's going to be tough. And I think that this team has maybe the mentality of the Philadelphia Flyers, but rightfully so, in that this team can be really good next year. They've got all their good players locked up with some term. They've got Lucic coming off the books next year. They've got Thick Rich contract, $2.5 million coming off the books next year. And I think there's some Michael Stone IR cap coming off. They're going to have some wiggle room in the free agency this year, and like Harp said, they've got some good young players. Hopefully the goaltending can bounce back. This team can be good next year, and they could be in a good spot, so maybe they're a little gun shy because they didn't want to screw up next year, and it's also a deep draft. We talked about that. But yes, Harp, this was a team that I wanted to mention in this episode because the lack of trades was a little bit alarming, and kind of, like you said, we expect Treliving to do a lot, and we expected this team to make a push, but it's crazy. It's crazy to think that Nashville is ahead of them in the standings, and look what they did.
That is wild. Case, I'm leaning more towards your side. I don't know if you two are directly opposed, but I think, Case, you are more of the mindset where you look at this team, you take a step back, and you think next year they could be just as good, if not better, than they were last season, given all the pieces. And I'm more so in that camp, because if we look at this team, at the start of the year, clearly they had some major changes to the personnel. And also this season, they've gotten terrible goaltending from both of their guys, and they're still generating expected goals. They're just not finishing. So I know it's more complicated than that, but when you boil it down, they're still generating offense, and they're not getting saves. So next year, I'm willing to bet on this team as a playoff team. if everything stays the same, just because, a lot went wrong in Calgary this year. And I think it would take a lot of things going wrong again next year, sort of in the same way, for them to be in the same spot. And I just don't see that happening. So I don't know if they're the losers of the trade deadline, in my opinion, because, Case, I think you're right. Maybe they were a little gun shy, given the fact that they have a pretty good team on paper. And you know what? For this team, I'm okay with that. Because I think they are still pretty good. And Harp, you mentioned the young players too. I think they're going to factor into the team next year even more so. Jacob Pelletier is really, really good. He is, man, like watching that guy play and looking at some of his underlying numbers already in the few games that he has played, he looks really good. He looks like he's going to be an offensive threat every time he's on the ice. So that's important for them because they need guys to score. This year it hasn't gone that way.
By the way, I want to point out a mistake I made about the cap situation next year for Calgary. All of that stuff is coming off the books, but something to remember is Huberdeau's contract kicks in next year, and that's an extra $5 million on his deal. So it's not
Uyghurs
as good,
too, right?
It's not as
good. Does
good.
Uyghur start next year?
Yeah, it does. And so with those two contracts starting and everyone else coming off the books, they actually already have $1.76 million more next year. For forwards.
Well, I mean, at least you're paying it to those guys instead of Milan Lucic. You just better hope next year that your $6 million man between the pipes plays like a $6 million man. Really.
Sorry, they are doing better on the cap next year for forwards, but defense, it goes up. I'm all over the place here. Just go Google cap friendly and go look at the team yourself.
Because that's what we're doing on the fly.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Winners and losers from NHL trade deadline week. Better name for it last week. Now in the rearview mirror, final stretch is on before the playoffs. All right, guys, let's do Fantasy Corner quick, and then we'll wrap up. Case, I'm not going to say much about our matchup last week. I'll let you take it away. You won, and let's get into our matchup last week.
You're now listening to the Fantasy Corner right here on the Boys in the Booth podcast.
Harper, I didn't just beat you. I drove you into the fucking ground. I beat you by 80 points. It was 213.50 to 133.20. Your team underperformed on the projected, and my team overperformed, but the projecteds were 201 to 155. So definitely smacked you around a little bit. Thanks, Jared McCann, for 4 goals and 2 assists in 4 games. Basically a full team effort here, except for Tony DeAngelo. Everyone putting up numbers for me. It was definitely a good year, and if I can continue to put, or a good week, if I can continue to put that up into playoffs here, I'll feel a little bit better. I still don't expect to win anything, but let's see how high I can finish, I guess.
Yeah, damn. Last week for me was not as good as Casey's week against you, Harper. I lost to your brother for my 3rd loss of the season, and it was a tough one because I was projected to win by almost 40 points, and he beat me by 4 on Sunday night. Because, and this is how badly I was like addicted to watching this all week. It came down to Sunday night, and it was the Avalanche game, and I turned it on because I was hoping for a Mikko Rantanen game winner, and obviously that didn't happen. So your brother beat me 210 to 206, but it was tied right up until the very end of overtime in that game. So bit of a tough one. Doesn't really change anything, though. I remain in second place. I don't think I'm going up or down. I mean, I certainly can't go up because Kuznetsov third line is 20-0 and might go a clean sweep on the season, 21-0. And then Noah Gretzky's now is 3 wins back of me, actually. So I'm staying pat in second place, and that's fine. Right now, it looks like I might be playing Casey, depending on what happens this week. Or maybe a couple other guys in the mix too. So it's getting exciting. Like we mentioned off the top, this is the final week of the regular season in fantasy. So the next few weeks are going to be insane, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, I think, Case, I think you put a dagger in my playoff hopes for the Sunnyvale Hockey Club, which is too bad. Playing the Meatheads this week, hopefully I can get a win and finish the regular season, and we'll see how it all shakes out. But yeah, this is the final week, and the playoffs should be fun for sure in our fantasy.
You can play spoiler this week. If you beat the Meatheads and one of the Zamboni guy, Brat Pack, or Nico is our captain loses, then you're playing spoiler for the Meatheads because they would have a shot at jumping up the standings.
Yeah,
I guess
that's true.
If I win this week, Chad, I have a pretty good chance of coming 6th at the moment.
Yeah, in turn, because the total points, right?
Well, no, because Zamboni guy is currently poised to lose to Dirty Birdies, and that would do it.
Oh, okay. So then that would be interesting. Just looking at it now, what's Nico is our captain. What is he projected for right now? Because he is currently sitting in that bubble position with you two guys as well. Projected to win against the mail order bride. So it could come down to Zamboni guy in 8th place and Meatheads in 9th, depending what happens between you and the Meatheads this week, Harper. So very interesting stuff, figuring that out on the fly. But because this is the last week of the season, I'll read top 5, bottom 5 real quick right now. And so here we go. Kuznetsov's third line, 20-0. Multiple scoregasms, that's me in second. Noah Gretzky's in third. Dirty Birdies in fourth. And North Korea, Paul North Korea in 5th. What a season Cameron had this year compared to last. Like just an absolute 180. And then bottom 5, 16th, Connor McJavids. 17th, Will Nye the Science Guy. 18th, I took the walk to Poland. 19th, the mail order brides. And 20th, 119-0, Eichel Tower.
All right, there we go. Final week of fantasy before the playoffs, and final stretch before the playoffs in the National Hockey League. Looking forward to it. Enjoy the games this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat with you again next Wednesday.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details. And don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at patreon.com/boysinthebooth.